Welcome to the TK Show with the Athletic Bay Area's Editor-in-Chief, Tim Kawakami.
All right, everybody, Tim Kawakami here, TK Show, recording live from Kawakami Studios. Ben Cruz is back producing. He's been a little time away, so we've got Ben back, and we got a great guest, somebody I've known for a very long time. Well, I don't know, we bumped into each other probably for, I don't know if it was Philly, but probably early 2000s Raiders, Michael, I think it was. Former Raiders executive of many teams, now author, writer, new athletic writer, NFL contributor, Michael Lombardi. Michael, great to have you on. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tim. I think, it was back in the early 2000s when we were actually good at the Raiders. Now that they're, it was fun to cover.
It was fun, and it was Al Davis, it was John Gruden. That's one thing about you, Michael, which is so great to have you writing for The Athletic, is that not only have you been through it, you've been through it with some incredible figures. Obviously, Bill Walsh with the Dynasty 49ers, John Gruden, Al Davis, and Bill Belichick. And I just wonder, when you've written a book, Gridiron Genius, Masterclass in winning championships and building dynasties in the NFL. What did it take? Is there a commonality that you found with all these guys? The greatest figures in NFL history?
Well, I think this, when I first was fortunate enough to start with the 49ers, and I talk about this in the book, I had a carpool karaoke life with Bill Walsh. I was able to drive him around, and those conversations in the car drove me in a direction. One of them happened to be the most football I ever learned, he said, was from working at the Raiders. So that just put it in my head, and I knew I wanted to work one day for the Raiders and learn from Al Davis. And so I was fortunate enough to be around him and learn about culture and his 17 standards of excellence that he preached every single day at every meeting. And that's really what Walsh was about. Walsh was about setting the culture and building a culture. And Belichick's about setting the culture and building the culture. And I think when you look at the teams in the NFL, it's culture-based first. Most fans get caught up in players and the reality of the locker, how much talent do we have on the team. But for Belichick and for Walsh, it really was about the culture they were creating in the building as leaders.
Those guys all talk about each other a little bit. I mean, Belichick asks you about Al and asks you about Bill and vice versa. Do you find yourself kind of talking about all of them with each other?
Well, when I worked for Bill, I didn't know anything, so I was a blank tape, and he was just trying to fill up the tape. When I got to work with Belichick, I had some experience lurking for Walsh, and this book was always in my head after, I knew Belichick was going to be a success, and people say, well, how did you know that? Nobody knew he was going to draft Tom Brady. Well, I wrote a book for the Rams back in 2000 and back in 1996 for John Shaw, and I told him he should hire Bill Belichick as his next head coach. And naturally, I said, if I were you, he asked me to do a project, Tim, and it's in the book. He said, take time and come up with a consensus of who you think would be the next best head coach for pro football. And I gave him two names. I gave him Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, and he basically threw the book in the trash.
and who I know John well. That does sound like John. Who did he hire?
I ended up hiring Dick Vermeil later on. Okay. He got Vermeil, and then 2 years later they got Mike Martz, and all of a sudden they got it turned around. Initially it wasn't good for Vermeil at first, but then they got it turned around. And I think that my point there was, look, you got to create a culture. And some teams in the NFL just don't want a culture. Some teams want the front office to run the team. Some teams want the owner to run the team. Some teams want the president to run the team. And for me, and what I've learned and what the book demonstrates, is the culture comes from the head coach. It can't come from anywhere else. The owner sets the principles. Look, the owner comes in and says, hey, I don't want this. I want this type of player on the team. This is what I'm looking for. I don't want to be embarrassed in this area. You guys make it work. And then you set the culture based on that.
Well, I want to get back to all that. It all connects, and it's all fascinating. But I definitely want to get to the thing that people in the Bay Area are really talking about and wondering about. That's the Khalil Mack situation with the Raiders. Michael, you know the Raiders organization. You know Gruden. Obviously, it's a different time span. You know what an impact player Khalil Mack is. Is this situation confusing you? And where do you think this ends up, say, in a week or two?
Well, I think, look, one thing I know about players, they don't like to miss checks. And you only get 17 of them. So when you miss a check, you can't get that money back. I mean, Earl Thomas is missing a lot. It's costing him a lot of money with this holdout. And I don't think it's going to get resolved soon. However, that being said, Mack, to me, is when you buy into the offensive football in the NFL today, which is get the lead, play from in front, and have pass rushers that can create turnovers, you got to buy into Khalil Mack. And that's one thing he does. He rushes the passer. And if you're John Gruden and you're building this team to score early and play from in front, you need pass rushers to be able to help you add to the league, create turnovers. So to me, it's really, when you break down a football team, you need a quarterback, you need an offensive line that can protect, and you need defensive linemen that can rush the passer. And you got to pay for all those positions.
I looked at this, and some of this I've learned by talking to you or reading you and reading a lot of other people. I mean, nobody has a big-time quarterback making $25 million or more, plus another player making over 20. The Raiders just happen to be in the situation where Carr has made the 25, and now Khalil Mack is market value is over 20, probably. Can you? I mean, looking at that, can you do that long term? Two players making that amount of the cap for 4 or 5 years?
Well, I think you have to draft well. I mean, what you have to do is you got to draft well. You can't have. You can't have, all the things. You can't have all the toys, right? So you got to draft well. And what the Patriots' attitude has always been is, look, we're not going to have the $10 million player. We're going to have a bunch of $4 and $5 million players, $6 million players, and then we're going to have 10 $1 million players. Mm-hmm. And the Eagles did this last year. The Eagles did it last year. Now, this year, the Eagles had to re-sign Tim Jernigan. They had to re-sign Alshon Jeffrey. They had to do all that. But that being said, I think it's very difficult to have that. But you got to have a great drafting. You got to have a great farm system. You got to give up some things. I mean, the hard part for John's going to be is not having great receivers. You're going to have some younger receivers. You're going to have receivers that you're not paying the top dollar to, because if you're giving some to the defense, it's coming away somewhere else. And the way John likes his team is with a lot of skilled players on offense. And I think he's going to have to change and develop receivers as he goes along.
Could you see John, and again, we're trying to read into this, but could you see Gruden saying, you know what, we really don't need to be paying Khalil Mack all this. I could spread this money around the rest of the roster.
I could, but I think that, to me, when you really know the NFL and you study the NFL, if you don't have a dominant pass rusher, if you don't have a Von Miller on your team, they're hard to get. It's hard to find Charles Haley in the 4th round. I mean, we got so lucky to find Haley in the 4th round. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, so it's hard to find Justin Houston's in the 3rd round. You can do it maybe, but it's a little more difficult. I think to me, you've got to be able to pay those guys when you get them, and you got to do a deal. Now, it's going to be tough because Mack knows he's a good player. He knows Von Miller's market. He sees Aaron Rodgers' huge contract today. I think he has to understand that, it's not all about just one thing. It's about how it helps the team. Whether that's to be said or not, I don't know.
You're the first one, I think, whoever explained to me about the escrow situation. I think I might ask you, why aren't more deals guaranteed? And you told me, if any guaranteed money deal, the owner has to put it in escrow, and they're not going to want to put $150 million in escrow. And that made all the sense in the world to me, and it really taught me something about this league. Around the league, do other owners wonder if Mark Davis has enough to spend on these guys? Guaranteed money, when everybody's got enough money to pay for a roster, but to put in escrow with a Derek Carr and a Khalil Mack and a John Gruden contract.
Everybody manipulates the rules, Tim. So what they do is they guarantee everything for skill. Mm-hmm. The only time you have to go to escrow is when you guarantee skill and injury, when you lock it up completely. Now, you can lock it up completely with triggers, and that's what most teams do. Yep. They trigger an event. So if you're on the roster on March the 10th, then it becomes fully guaranteed for skill and injury. You don't have to fund that right away. Yep. So there's all these little mechanisms that you use throughout the contract. It's not like the NBA where you just say, okay, I'm going to give you $50 million for 5 years. It's all guaranteed. Here you go. That's not it. And so you've got to do a lot of manipulation. I think they should change the rule, frankly, because the way it makes it too hard. It makes it more difficult. But because there is loopholes in the rule and there are triggers, it does benefit the owners.
Is there some thought around the league that Mark Davis doesn't have quite enough money to do this, just generally?
I don't get that sense. I mean, look, you can do anything you want to do with the cap money. I mean, it's really not. It's not that difficult. It's not in terms of, you're talking about cash flow. You're talking about having money. Cash flow is one problem. Having money is another one. Mm-hmm. Having money, I don't think the Raiders have that issue. Having cash flow, most teams do have cash flow problems. Very few in the NFL don't have cash flow problems, and they're the teams that have great stadiums. And so they're the teams that have the ability just to write checks. I remember being in the league when Jerry Jones signed Anton Davis, the big guard from the Cardinals, and he gave him a check for $10 million. I mean, there was no way I've never signed a player to a contract that gave him a $10 million signing bonus, which we have, but then payable upon execution of the rider. Never included that language in it because we always wanted to spread it out because the owners get paid in football by the TV contract in terms of the player salary. They get some money in August. They get money in September, October, November, December, and January. That's when all that money comes in.
Yep.
We're going to take a quick break to talk about our friends over at Hims. 66% of men lose their hair by age 35. Some of you Warriors fans probably have a joke about this regarding the newest Los Angeles Laker, but it's not funny when it happens to you. The thing is, when you start to notice hair loss, it's too late. And why do guys turn to weird solutions, or even worse, do nothing, when they can turn to medicine and science? We've got a solution for you. 4hims.com, a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. Thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical-grade solutions to treat your hair loss. No waiting room, no awkward doctor visits, and you save hours by going to 4hims.com. It's so easy. Answer a few quick questions, a doctor reviews them, and can prescribe you products which are shipped directly to your door. If you order now, TK's listeners get a trial month of Hims for just $5 while supplies last. See website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or a pharmacy. So, go to 4hims.com/TK. That's FORHIMS.com/TK. Again, that's 4hims.com/TK.
You know Gruden so well. What did you think about when he's coming back to the Raiders, nine years off and longer than that away from the Raiders? Do you think it's a natural fit, or do you think John's going to have to do some adjusting along the way here?
Well, I mean, look, John's going to have to. He's playing two roles. He's got control of the whole organization. He's going to have to handle that. He's going to handle the player evaluation. Make sure he looks at the team for today and tomorrow, and not just for today.
Yep.
And then he's going to have to handle the evaluation, and he's going to have to make decisions in terms of paying players. I mean, Belichick does all those things, and he's going to have to do it. And I think those are challenging times in the NFL, and he's going to have to take away a little bit of what he likes to do. He still likes to he still likes to run his scripts for defense, for offense. I mean, so he acts like an offensive coordinator, but he's got this huge title of head coach, general manager, whatever you want to call him, the guru. He's going to have to be able to handle some of the different roles and give up something in terms of that. You just can't do everything.
His title is $100 million man, I think. That kind of says it all. You mentioned Belichick. You know him so well. You were there not long ago. Did the Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm sure you've talked about this on various other places, but I am just so curious about it. Even when it happened, I was curious about it. Did the Jimmy Garoppolo trade to the 49ers for a second-round pick surprise you that Bill would get off of Garoppolo with Brady aging, having already traded Jacoby Brissett, and with as much respect I think he has for Jimmy Garoppolo's talents?
Well, he knows Garoppolo's a good player. I think the reality here is, if Jimmy Garoppolo was represented by anybody other than Don Yee, there might have been a deal done. But Don Yee represents Tom Brady, and he also represents Jimmy Garoppolo. So that really played hard into Belichick's hand of what he wanted to do. And I think that became a problem. And so by that being said, it kind of limited his options. And I think he took the best deal he could make at the time. I'm not saying he's happy with the deal. I don't know. I've not asked him. But I think he knows that Garoppolo is going to be a really good player.
Do you think, it's been reported that he respected Mike Shanahan so much, respects Kyle Shanahan's coaching, and he wanted to put Jimmy with an offense that he think that he could really do well with? You put any credence into that?
Yeah, I think he did. I think he wanted to put Jimmy in a place where he knew Jimmy could succeed, because I think Jimmy did a lot for the team. I mean, Bill respects people that helps the team, part of the culture. This isn't a one-man operation. I mean, it's all team, and I think he respected what Jimmy was able to do for the team from the time we drafted him in 2014 until the day he traded him.
Maybe I'm dumb, but from the beginning I thought, why didn't he just ask the 49ers for a first-round pick? I mean, it could have been a really, really high pick. I realize that, but if you're the 49ers, wouldn't you have given up the first-round pick if that's what it would have taken to get Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, I don't think they were in the Jimmy Garoppolo love mode at the time. I think that they were still in the Kirk Cousins, we're going to sign him love mode.
That's true.
And so I think it took a lot to convince Kyle that Jimmy was better than Kirk Cousins. I think Kyle had his mind made up that Kirk Cousins was the answer, and he was going to be the savior to his problems as the 49ers head coach and executive. So I think, and give Kyle credit. Kyle, gave it an opportunity, looked at it, but basically made the right decision.
And plus, you got a chance to look at him before you had to pay him. With Cousins, who was an older player.
He drafted Cousins, so he drafted him. He knew him.
Yep, and it's a great point. And you could also use that in the trade, like, hey, we still could get Cousins, so we don't have to give you more than a second round pick. I really haven't thought about that. That's a really interesting point. What do you think of what the 49ers are doing? That organization also. Do you think this is? I mean, we seem to think they're building something pretty decent here. What do you think of the last few years, and where do you think they are now?
Well, I think they're finally at a point where they got a quarterback, right? So they got somebody that they can build around. They got a great head coach. I think Kyle Shanahan's one of the best coaches. We interviewed Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator when I was still the GM in Cleveland. And after I interviewed him, I said we should have hired him as the head coach back then. I think he's outstanding. He's a great game plan. He understands how to attack a defense. What makes Kyle so effective is he knows how to attack the adjustments to the defense, not just attack the defense. That's really important. That's a huge difference. Most offensive coordinators attack the coverage, but Kyle's so effective. And I think we heard this when they played Jacksonville. All the Jacksonville players this summer, Jalen Ramsey was talking about how they really knew our scheme. That's Kyle. Kyle knows how to attack a scheme. He knows how to attack the adjustments. And with a quarterback, the sky's the limit. I think we're in a period in the NFL, and I've been talking about this. I wrote about it for The Athletic today. I think it's getting overlooked way too much. We're talking too much about, I don't like football, I'm not going to watch football, all these people saying it. We're about to embark on an era of football in the NFL that's never been seen before. We've got some incredibly talented young players in this league, and it's going to be an incredible time to watch the NFL. I think we're getting drowned by some of the negativity on air. Look, if you don't like football and you don't want to watch it, that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to. It's still the most popular sport. It's still going to outdraw everything that we do. I mean, it drives the drink. It's fascinating that the people that hate football, they get paid because they cover football.
Yep. Well, listen, the ratings aren't going away. The ratings are there. They might be, everything in television is declining, right? Because there's the glut of stations, but the television rating for the NFL is not going anywhere. It is the number one sport. It's going to be the number one sport for a very long time. I won't have to ask you. I know you've been close with Jim Harbaugh for a while, and hey, give me credit. I stayed away from bugging you. You had your son as his personal assistant at some very interesting times there, and I did not ask you about it. I didn't bug you, but I don't ask you to give up anything private. But what were those final years for Harbaugh like with the 49ers?
I just think, to me, it was a very difficult situation. I think that Trent, Belke, and Jim were probably not the right marriage. And I said it at the time. I interviewed for the job before Trent got the job. I finished second in a two-man race. And I told Jim at that time, and, I said, I don't know if this is going to work for you, Jim. And I think it was hard. I think that part of this thing, and this whole podcast, I started about this, that you have to understand the role of the GM is to support the coach. The way the 49ers have their culture set today, even though John Lynch is titled general manager, Kyle Shanahan is ultimately, the decisions are made at his desk.
Yep.
I'm not saying he doesn't listen to John Lynch. I'm not saying he doesn't talk to Martin Mayhew, but the team runs through the head coach. And whenever you set up an organization the other way, where the team runs through the general manager, it ain't going to work. I'm just telling you, it's not going to work, because the coach coaches the team. And he's got to stand in front of the players. And if they think that somebody else controls their employment, they're not going to get the most out of them. So the game's got to come through the head coach's chair. Now, you can play the game and masquerade it and give guys titles and pretend that. But at the end of the day, I worked for Belichick. As a GM, I worked for Belichick. That's the key. John McVay, the great general manager of the 49ers, did a wonderful job and won Super Bowls, but he worked for Bill Walsh. Yep. Make no mistake. He worked for Bill. And that's the way it works. And John accepted it. I accepted it. John Lynch probably has accepted it. But at the 49ers at the time, there was that constant conflict. And it was never going to work. I told Jim after I didn't get the job it wasn't going to work, and I ended up being right.
When you were interviewing for it, that was going to be a situation Jim Harbaugh was going to have basically overall personnel say?
No, I think the 49ers at that time wanted to make sure they weren't going to hire a yes man. I think they saw me as somebody who might be a yes man, and my point to them both was to Jed and to Prague was, look, I'm not a yes man. It's my job to encourage him to think a different way, to see things from a different perspective. But we have to be on the same page organizationally. But when you start drafting players and forcing players and doing things down a coach's throat, it ain't going to work. It's not going to work. There's not going to be ever a time in an organization where it can. And give credit to Jed. Give credit to Prague. Those guys saw it didn't work, even though they went through. It took them through Jim, and it took them a while. And they went to Chip Kelly, and it went through all that. They finally realized that, hey, we're going to have to give the keys to the store to somebody, and it's got to be a coach. It can't be a GM.
So when you're telling Harbaugh that you're not sure that it's going to work with Balky, is he just saying, we're going to try, we're just going to try here?
Well, no, I think he was more at that time he was optimistic. I mean, he was encouraging. I mean, who walks into a job and thinks it's not going to go? And they won, and he did a great job,
Mm-hmm.
And, and they got, if Kaepernick throws the ball on the other side of the formation instead of Richard Sherman's interception, they might be playing Baltimore instead of Seattle.
Yep.
I mean, they might be playing, and might be playing in the Super Bowl. So, look, I think it's pretty clear that you have to have the right dynamic in an organization in terms of structure and organization. And we're not baseball. Baseball's a different sport. Baseball, the GM can control the farm system, control the players. The manager manages the team. He manages the day-to-day operation. Football is a different sport. The head coach has to be the guy that runs the team through the team, and he's got to have the ability to do all those jobs. I mean, look, when Belichick leaves in the summertime, at the end, when he goes on a vacation in June after the last minicamp, he's already scouted and written up, Tim, all the players in the Pac-12, all the players in the Big Ten, all the players in the AC. He saves the Southeast Conference for when he's got time off. That's when he's doing his job. He's got time to do all different jobs. That's the challenge John Gruden faces. Is he going to do that? Is he going to take that? Is he going to step away from the offense a little bit to allow him time to put on his GM cap? Because the Raiders now have the culture and the dynamic that works. John's got to be able to make it work.
I want to ask you about writing. You've mentioned this in The Athletic. It's fascinating for me that you started thinking about writing long ago, and you knew you wanted to do. You took a writing course. How's it gone so far? You like the process?
I have. I've always wanted to write. I think if you came to my home, I have more autographed books by writers. I don't have any autographed jerseys from players. So I've always saw my life as around books. I like books. I read quite a bit. And I've always been fascinated by writers. I've always wanted to spend time around great writers, whether it's Robert Caro or John Irving, whoever you think, on different venues, whether it's novels or historical perspectives. So, I've always wanted to do that. And I felt like, you get to a certain level in the NFL, we're not a league that hires guy with experience because they're afraid you're going to come take their job. So there's a lot of us ex-guys, whether it's Jerry Angelo, Tim Ryan, all these guys that have had jobs. You can't get jobs back in the league because nobody really wants to hire you. So I knew I needed to take a different course and a different avenue if I wanted to keep being vibrant and in the sport of football. So I took the writing course, and it's been great.
One thing I really like and respect about you is you're not afraid to be critical of people and of teams and of moves. Has that been a hard thing to adjust to, knowing that you're going to get some people who know you well who don't like to hear it very much?
Well, look, I think to me, I don't understand the NFL. I don't understand sports in general. People go on politics and they talk about politics and you can be. I mean, Barack Obama said this the other day about John McCain. We both didn't agree on things, but we had mutual respect for one another. I think that's the principle you want to critique people in. Just the same way, if somebody critiques what I did, and I respect their opinion, to me, I take that as information and I take that as a way of learning. I don't take that as an insult. And I think unfortunately, that's been the way it's gone. You see that. But look, I get a lot of phone calls from different coaches in the league. I got a lot of people follow to want to know or read the book or that. I think there's information you can give out to coaches, and it's important that you share it. I mean, I don't do any good to the viewer, or to the audience, or the reader to just say, oh, everything's great. You got to be able to be honest and give a perspective.
All right, let's get an honest perspective from the question I ask all my guests, and my producer's favorite question. Always makes me ask it, and I love asking it anyway. Michael Lombardi, what's your favorite restaurant?
That's a really hard one. I would say I would probably say Del Posto in New York City is my favorite restaurant.
Okay. Italian, obviously?
Yeah, it's upscale Italian, but it's one of the few Italian restaurants that got a Michelin star in the United States. I have not been to the one who's the top-ranked restaurant in Italy. I probably would want to go to that one too, but there's so many great places here. Toscano's in L.A. is my favorite restaurant. I would say it's close between Toscano's and Del Posto.
By the way, I follow you on Twitter, obviously, and I laugh and I like your Sixers comments. You're a Philly guy. What do you think about the Sixers right now? You liking the situation, or are you a little concerned?
I love Brett Brown. I'm a huge Brett Brown fan. I think what he was able to endure through this stupid process was incredible. He kept coaching. He kept doing things. There's people back in Philly that think the process has worked, and nobody really looks at it. They just say it. They don't really examine it. But I've been impressed with Brett. I think there's a bright future. I'm disappointed in where we are with Fultz in terms of his development as a player. I was disappointed in the selection. To me, this is common sense GM 101. I mean, if you have 3 players in the draft you like, Jason Tatum, Lorenzo Ball, and Markelle Fultz, and you're picking 3, you don't trade up and give a huge asset away to get one guy. Yep. You take your chances and get one of them. And just call Danny Ainge's bluff. Hey, Danny, if you like Jason Tatum so much, pick him at 1. I'll pick Fultz at 3.
Yep.
But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And, now I got to watch it again. So it's a horrible existence being a Sixer fan. It really is.
I just love reading you talking about it because you know me, I spent some years in Philly, and I just love that passion. I just love that emotion, and it's informed, and it's very interesting for me. So, listen, keep going with it. I mean, what will we miss? You doing the podcast on the Ringer? Anything else that you
I do a podcast on the Ringer today. I'll do a podcast talking about the great Hugh Jackson and Hard Knocks, and everything that they talk about, and GM Street, and I'm getting ready to write a column for The Athletic on the Aaron Rodgers right now.
So, go. All right, Michael. Great getting back in touch with you. We'll do this again. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, that's the show. We just got hung up on by Michael Lombardi. That's my fault, but I should have wrapped up the show before that. And that's it for this week. Thanks, everybody.